What the hell are you doing? Mapping the garden? Some kind of a cartographer? No.
Mapping your garden is a step you should not skip if you want to have the ultimate peace of mind and confidence in your garden planning and management this year. In this video, I'm going to show you my simple and kind of nerdy system to map out and track my garden from ideation all the way to harvest, and I only use freely available software tools and some common gardening supplies to get this done. If you follow this system, you can say goodbye to mixed up plants, stop caring about lost tags, never again wonder, will I have space for all of these plants? And you'll collect a ton of data along the way too. So let's dive in. To get started, you really just need pen and paper. But I'm gonna do this in a slightly more high-tech way, because I'm a nerd.
You're such a nerd.
So I'm gonna do all of my tracking and mapping in an online spreadsheet using Google Sheets. Google Sheets is free to use, you just need an account, which is free to create. I prefer to use Google Sheets because it's always with me. I can connect to my sheet from my tablet, my phone, my laptop, anywhere I'm at, and easily make updates or check on the status of plants when I'm in the garden. But if you wanna do this with pen and paper, that'll work too. First things first, we're gonna get the basic sheet setup done so that we have something to work in. You can add as many different sheets into your file as you like. I always start with my master grow list as the first tab, where I list out each type of plant I'm gonna grow. I like to put a few columns in here like the name, the location of the seed, the date it was planted, and then columns for things like nursery pot location, transplant date, garden location, harvest date. You can add columns for really anything you'd like to track as well. I usually end up putting notes in the far right column, but for this system, the location columns are going to be crucial. So now we have our basic sheet set up that we'll need to get started. Let's jump in and start making our map. So here is where you need to get out into your garden. You're going to need a measuring tape and something to take notes or make drawings on, so pen and paper works great. You'll want to get your basic space measured first, how wide and how deep is your yard. I'm going to be mapping my full backyard since I have multiple garden spaces scattered throughout. If you just have garden space in one part of your yard, you can absolutely just measure that as well. You don't need to include parts of your yard that you won't be planting. Once you've got your basic dimensions, you'll want to go ahead and start measuring and counting all of your containers, your raised beds, in-ground gardens, really any other growing space that you have where you're going to be putting plants. You'll want to have an accurate measurement of that total overall grow space, right? And so you should also measure things that might be in the way, like window wells or patios or decks, anything that's going to impede your ability to plant plants. This will help make your map more accurate and keep you from accidentally planting for plants in those spaces. Once you have your measurements all gathered up, let's head back to Google Sheets and make our map. Okay, so this is the part where you're probably like, boss, a spreadsheet is not a drawing or a mapping program. What's wrong with you? But hang with me. Yes, you can do this easily with graph paper and a pen, but having your map be digital is full of so many advantages that you're going to find out about soon. So let's start a new sheet in your file and call it map. Now I like to keep this as simple as possible because math makes everything worse. I also happen to practice square foot gardening, so using a scale of 1 cell in the spreadsheet for 1 square foot, it's the easiest way to do this. So to get your cells to be square instead of rectangles is easy. Just select a bunch of rows by clicking on one, holding shift, and clicking on another one further down. And then you can right click and select resize rows, however many you selected. I like to set these at 100. Do the same with the columns across the top. Right click, select resize columns, and set that to 100 as well. Now we've got a nice square grid that we can draw our garden with. Yes, we're gonna draw in the spreadsheet. I do this by using colors and borders to define things. Start with the overall width and height of the area that you're mapping. In my case, it's my whole dang yard, front and back. Use color fill or borders to mark this outline, whichever you prefer. And then start adding your growing areas and containers. Remember, 1 cell is 1 square foot. And so for things like round pots, I usually consider them 1 square foot if they're 12 inches or less across the top. But usually when I'm doing these maps, I start with my raised beds because they're easy to place in the garden and they're mostly rectangles. So a 3x6 foot raised bed, I'll highlight 3 rows of 6 cells and then fill them with whatever color I want to represent raised beds. I use a light tan color for raised beds in my map, you can use whatever you want. I also want to put a thick border around this bed to make it clear that those 18 cells are grouped as one object. So I just add a thick borderline around the outside of the cells only. Really easy to do in Google Sheets. And now I have a raised bed mapped out. Do this over and over and over for each growing area. I prefer to use different colors to represent different types of grow areas, so light tan for the raised beds, a different color for my containers, a different color for my grow bags, a different color for maybe in-ground beds. And you do this for a little bit and all of a sudden, boom, the whole yard is mapped. It looks like it's difficult, but it's super easy. I did my whole property, including the front yard, the house, everything. It's all to scale, and it took me about a total of an hour and a half of setup. But what's nice about this, now that I've got the basic map, I can save this file and then I can reuse it year after year after year, and I'll just be changing what plants I'm putting in each location. It's a pretty great setup. And at this point, you can now very easily determine just how much space you have out in that garden so you know how many plants you can plan for. So now you choose your specific plant varieties based on the space you have available. I like to make my lists in alphabetical order, but this is completely optional. It's not necessary at all. It's just easier for my brain. So order your plants however you like. I narrowed my list down to about 180 pepper varieties and 30 tomato varieties, dozens of flowers, herbs, veggies, and more. I never would have expected I could fit so many plants in my yard if I hadn't mapped it out. I know now how much space I have and how much I can plan for. What makes this system work so well is those other columns we added to the spreadsheet earlier that refer to location. And to make that work, you need to label your seed starting gear, your pots, and other containers. Most seed starting trays like these, even the bigger ones, they're arranged in a grid, so it makes it really easy to label them. I give each seed starting tray a number 17 in this case, and then I labeled the rows and columns just like a spreadsheet, letters going horizontally and numbers going vertically. This way, it's incredibly easy to note in my spreadsheet where each variety of seed is planted. A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3. For example, O1A1 would be tray 1 top left cell. I also label the 10-20 trays I use, and in that case I use letters. The 3.5-inch pots I use to pot up all of my plants, they get labels too. The letter of the tray they're associated with, and then a number 1 through 18, since 18 fit per tray. So now with our gear all labeled, we are ready to plant. As you plant your seeds, note in your sheet which cell each one goes in. This way, you don't need to bother putting a little tiny label in each of those seed cells. I have found this to be a huge time saver, and there's never a doubt about what is where. I can just look at the sheet. I like to also take this one step further, and this is optional. I make a sheet for each of my seedling trays so that I can mark what is germinated. This is not necessary, but it is oddly satisfying to come in every evening after work and mark the new seedlings that have popped up on these sheets. So I do it every year. As you transplant your sprouted seedlings to your nursery pots, again, in your sheet, note the specific location of each. This way, you also don't need to make a bunch of plant tags. This seems like a small thing, but if you have ever written out hundreds and hundreds of plant tags by hand, you know it's tedious. And if you've ever had those tags fade or wash away or get blown away in a storm, you know it's infuriating because now you don't know what's in the pot. And so of course, the last step is planting these babies out into your garden. And as you do that, you will fill in their location in that column on your sheet as well. You can use the exact spreadsheet cell coordinates for this to keep it as simple as possible. So in this case, maybe I'm putting an Ahi Guyana plant here in M4. I also put the name on the map itself, and I usually include the coordinate name of the nursery pot just to give me a little bit of peace of mind when I'm out there planting out for the first time at the beginning of the season. I can just follow my own map. This one goes here, this one goes here. It's great. Now I do make plant tags for my plants outside so that I can immediately know what is what when I'm out there. It also helps a lot with photographs to have the tag visible in the shot next to the fruit, then I can always keep track of what's what. It's also super helpful to have a record of each plant's location, right? Sometimes plant tags are lost to wind, animals, idiots, and so it's good to have a record that you can look back on. So there it is. This is how I track and map my garden every year. It's nerdy, yes, but it's incredibly powerful and saves me time, money, and worry. The fun comes from the endless opportunity for expansion on this system, right? So I'd love to hear some of your ideas. I've thought about doing things like making a sun map to overlay on my garden map, so I can figure out where's the sunniest spots during the day, what gets the longest range of sun, what gets afternoon shade. You can keep track of when you harvest everything and even maybe how much you harvest from each plant so that you've got a good heads up next year on what varieties you want to grow because they did well for you last year. This thing works from seed to harvest. It takes the guesswork out of planning and planting, and it helps me keep track of hundreds of plants every year in my garden. I love it. I really think you'll like it if you give it a try, and I think people out there are much smarter than me that will give me some good ideas on how to improve this too. If you want to learn more about how I start seeds, watch this video here. And if you want to see some of the incredible peppers I have grown and tasted over the years, watch this series of videos here. But above everything else, remember, plants help us grow.